Why would someone break a waitress's arm over a pocket in her apron? The text appeared on the cracked screen of an old phone at 11:47 p.m., glowing pale blue beneath the fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital. Emily Walker stared at it through one swollen eye. A plastic hospital tag hung loose around her wrist. Dried blood darkened the edge of her navy apron. And hidden inside the torn lining of that apron was the one thing someone had already tried to take from her once. 32 seconds later, another message appeared. "Stay where you are. I'm sending someone." Emily's stomach dropped. She had sent the message to the wrong number. 3 hours earlier, the dinner rush at Belmont River House had been loud enough to drown out thought. Crystal wine glasses chimed against polished tables. Silver trays floated through the dining room like mirrors catching light. Beyond the glass partition, wealthy guests laughed over seafood towers and $1,200 bottles of wine, while the kitchen sweated behind them like a machine no one was supposed to notice. Emily knew that feeling. Invisible, useful, replaceable. At 31, she had spent most of her life learning how to take up less space than her body occupied. She knew how customers looked at her, how their eyes paused on her hips before they looked at her name tag, how managers described her as dependable when they meant harmless, how people smiled politely while deciding she wasn't important enough to remember. Tonight had felt different from the beginning. It started with Nathan Cole, Director of Compliance. Perfect suit, perfect haircut, perfect smile. The kind of man who could ruin a life while sounding concerned about your well-being. Emily was carrying a tray of empty wine glasses when she saw him exit a restricted hallway near the administrative offices. That alone wasn't unusual. What caught her attention was the man beside him, maintenance supervisor, nervous, sweating, looking over his shoulder every few seconds. Nathan handed him a thick envelope. The supervisor didn't take it immediately. They argued, quietly, tightly. Then Nathan smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind people use when they already know they're going to win. The supervisor finally accepted the envelope. Emily kept walking. That should have been the end of it. But as she passed the hallway, something slid from beneath the supervisor's arm and landed near the baseboard. Neither man noticed. Emily did. Because people ignored waitresses. They talked in front of them, lied in front of them, dropped secrets in front of them. She waited until both men disappeared, then bent down and picked it up. A maintenance receipt. Folded twice. Stained with coffee. Ordinary except for one thing. The date. The equipment inspection listed on the receipt had supposedly happened 6 months after the machine involved in a fatal workplace accident had already been cleared safe. Emily knew that accident. Everyone in the company did. She stood frozen for a second, staring at the numbers. Then she slipped the receipt into the inner pocket of her apron. 10 minutes later, someone grabbed her from behind in the employee parking garage. She never saw his face, only felt his hand crush her wrist, heard the crack, felt herself hit concrete. Then a voice. Low, calm, professional. "Give me what's in the pocket." The last thing she remembered before blacking out was realizing the man wasn't looking for her wallet, her phone, or her keys. He was looking for a piece of paper that should never have mattered. Until she pulled the receipt from her apron pocket in the emergency room and discovered something folded behind it that hadn't been there before. Emily stared at the folded piece of paper hidden behind the maintenance receipt. Her good hand trembled as she carefully separated the two. It wasn't another receipt. It wasn't money. It was a key card sleeve from Belmont River House. Plain white. Cheap cardboard. The kind employees threw away every day without thinking. But someone had written a time across the front in black marker. 11:18 p.m. Beneath it were 3 words. Not for records. A chill crawled across the back of her neck. The emergency room suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too exposed. Somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped steadily. A nurse pushed a cart past her door. The ordinary sounds only made. The note feels stranger. Emily looked at the maintenance receipt again, then at the sleeve, then back at the receipt. The timestamps didn't match. The equipment inspection was logged at 11:18 p.m. 6 months ago. According to company records, the restaurant had already been closed for nearly an hour. She heard footsteps approaching. Fast. Instinctively, she folded both items and slipped them into the torn inner lining of her apron. A moment later, a doctor entered with discharge papers. 20 minutes after he left, another visitor arrived. Nathan Cole stepped into the room carrying white lilies and a paper bag from an expensive coffee shop across the street. His charcoal overcoat looked untouched by the rain outside. His smile looked professionally concerned. "Emily," he said softly, "you gave everyone quite a scare." She said nothing. Nathan placed the flowers on the windowsill. Then the coffee bag. The rich smell of roasted beans filled the room. "I heard the surgery went well." He pulled a chair closer. "I'm relieved." Emily noticed he never once looked at her cast. His eyes kept drifting toward the apron folded beside her bed. "Human resources prepared everything already," he continued. "Medical coverage, paid leave, compensation. We want to make sure you're taken care of." He slid a folder across the blanket. Inside was a settlement agreement. More money than Emily had ever seen attached to her name. "All I need is a signature." His voice remained gentle, patient, almost kind. Emily studied him. "You work fast." Nathan laughed quietly. "Accidents create paperwork. That's my job." Silence settled between them. Not awkward silence. Heavy silence. The kind that waited. The kind that listened. Finally, Emily asked, "How did you know I was in this room?" Nathan's smile didn't disappear. But it changed. Just slightly. "The hospital called corporate." "At midnight?" she asked. He held her gaze for 1 second too long, then looked away. "People worry about you, Emily." The answer sounded reasonable. It felt wrong. After Nathan left, she opened the folder again. Most people would have looked at the dollar amount. Emily looked at the dates. The paperwork had been prepared at 10:52 p.m. According to her hospital bracelet, she hadn't even been admitted until 11:07. Her pulse quickened. 15 minutes later, her old phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. No picture. Just a single message. Did he offer flowers or money first? Emily stared at the screen, then slowly typed back. "Money." 3 dots appeared immediately, then vanished. 30 seconds later, another message arrived. "Keep both. Sign nothing." Emily sat frozen. Outside her room, the hallway lights dimmed for the night shift. Somewhere far below, rain tapped against the hospital windows. Then her phone vibrated one more time. This time it wasn't a text. It was an image. A photograph of Belmont River House's employee shift log from the night she was attacked. Every name was listed exactly where it belonged except one. According to the official record, Nathan Cole had never been in the building at all. Emily stared at the photograph until the screen dimmed. Then she touched it again and enlarged the image. The employee shift log filled the display. Names, clock and times, station assignments. Everything looked normal at first glance. That was the point. Whoever altered it understood exactly how normal it needed to look. The rain continued tapping against the hospital window. Soft, steady, like fingers waiting outside. Emily zoomed in on Nathan Cole's department access records printed along the bottom. Empty. Clean. According to the official log, he had never entered the building that night. But Emily remembered something most people wouldn't. She remembered because waitresses lived by time. By minutes. By table numbers. By the difference between a 10-minute delay and a $40 tip. Nathan had stopped her near the service station at exactly 10:36 p.m. and asked why Table 22 still hadn't received dessert menus. She remembered because Table 22 was celebrating a 50th wedding anniversary. The husband had ordered a 60-year-old bourbon. The wife had cried when the staff brought out the cake. Emily remembered the gold balloons, the silver candles, the exact shade of lipstick on the woman's wine glass. Most of all, she remembered checking the wall clock above the espresso machine because Nathan had made her feel late even though she wasn't. The shift log said Nathan wasn't there. Her memory said otherwise. One of them was lying. The next morning she was discharged just after sunrise. The sky over the city looked pale and exhausted. A black SUV waited across the street. Emily noticed it immediately, not because she expected danger, because the same vehicle had been parked outside Belmont River House 3 nights a week for nearly 6 months. Most people never noticed drivers. Waitresses did. The man behind the wheel didn't wave, didn't smile. He simply watched the hospital entrance through dark sunglasses. Emily walked the opposite direction. 3 blocks later, she stopped at a small diner and slid into a corner booth. The smell of old coffee and frying bacon wrapped around her like something familiar. Safe. For almost 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then the front door opened. A tall man entered wearing a charcoal coat. He wasn't one of Nathan's people. He moved differently, quietly, like someone who never needed to prove he belonged in a room. He crossed the diner and sat opposite her without asking. Emily looked up. Dark eyes. Silver at the temples. No visible bodyguards. No introduction. He placed something on the table between them. Her apron. Freshly cleaned. Folded. Neat. Emily's breath caught. Hospital laundry? She asked. The man glanced at the torn pocket. No. Silence followed. Heavy. Deliberate. Emily had spent years around powerful people. Most filled silence with explanations. This man seemed to use silence the way other men use threats. Finally he spoke. Who washed it? Emily frowned. What? He turned the apron over. One finger traced the damaged lining. Someone cleaned the blood. His voice remained calm. Not all of it. Emily looked closer. The apron smelled faintly of industrial detergent. But inside the torn pocket, beneath the stitching, a dark stain remained untouched. The cleaner had focused on the visible blood and ignored the hidden one. The man leaned back slightly. Interesting mistake. Emily studied him. You think someone searched it? I think someone searched it. Twice. The words settled between them. Cold. Precise. Then his phone vibrated once on the table. He glanced at the screen. No visible reaction. But something changed behind his eyes. Just enough. He turned the display toward her. It was a still image from Belmont's security system. Grainy. Time-stamped. The hallway outside the administrative offices. At 10:41 p.m., 5 minutes after Nathan supposedly wasn't there, the footage skipped forward exactly 93 seconds. The image remained on the screen between them. 93 missing seconds. Not 30. Not 5. 93. Long enough to walk into a room. Long enough to remove a file. Long enough to hurt someone. The diner suddenly felt smaller. The smell of coffee had gone bitter. Outside, tires hissed across wet pavement. Emily looked from the security still to the man sitting across from her. People don't accidentally lose 93 seconds. He said nothing, just slid the phone back into his pocket. The silence that followed wasn't agreement. It wasn't trust. It felt more like measurement, as if he were weighing her against something she couldn't see. What's your name? Emily finally asked. Roman Moretti. The name landed heavily, even before she recognized it. Some names arrived before introductions. Some names carried rooms inside them. Emily knew Belmont River House belonged to the Moretti Group. She also knew employees lowered their voices whenever the family name came up. Roman watched her absorb that information. Then he stood. Come with me. 20 minutes later, Emily found herself inside a private dining suite on the top floor of Belmont. The room overlooked the river through 40-foot windows. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Dark walnut walls reflected warm light. Everything smelled expensive. The kind of room built for people who never checked bank balances before ordering wine. Emily felt painfully aware of her hospital bracelet. Her cast. The worn sneakers she hadn't had time to replace in nearly 2 years. Across the room sat 3 people waiting at a polished conference table. A corporate attorney. A board member. Nathan Cole. Nathan rose first. His smile arrived. Instantly. Perfect. Controlled. Emily. I'm relieved you're recovering. The attorney stood next. Gray suit. Silver watch. Careful eyes. Miss Walker, we'd like to clear up some misunderstandings. The board member remained seated. A woman in pearls and a navy blazer. She looked Emily over the way wealthy people sometimes examined restaurant menus. Briefly. Decisively. Then she smiled. This has been very emotional for you. The words sounded kind. They cut deeper than an insult. Emily understood immediately. Emotional meant unreliable. Emotional meant mistaken. Emotional meant easier to dismiss. Nathan gestured toward a chair. Please sit. Emily sat. Her cast rested in her lap. Nathan folded his hands. Everyone agrees your accident was unfortunate. Accident. There was the word again. Polished. Safe. Convenient. But trauma can affect memory. Emily said nothing. The board member nodded sympathetically. Especially after surgery. The attorney opened a folder. We're concerned someone may be encouraging conclusions that aren't supported by evidence. Emily looked at the papers. Her name appeared at the top. Beneath it was a prepared statement. She read the first line. I have no reason to believe my injury was intentional. Her pulse slowed. Not faster. Slower. The way it always did when something finally stopped pretending. Nathan slid a pen toward her. Nobody is asking you to lie. Emily picked up the paper. Read every line. Then carefully set it back down. Good. Nathan smiled. Then we're making progress. Emily reached into her pocket with her left hand and placed the folded maintenance receipt on the table. The room went quiet. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just enough. She pointed at the timestamp. Then explained this. Nathan didn't touch the receipt. Neither did the attorney. Neither did the board member. Emily noticed something else instead. Nathan's smile remained exactly where it was, but his right thumb suddenly pressed hard against the edge of his phone beneath the table. Roman, standing near the windows, never moved, never spoke. Yet Emily caught him watching that single thumb. Nathan finally looked up. That's not relevant. Emily held his gaze. You knew exactly where I was in the hospital before anyone should have. For the first time all morning, Nathan's eyes flickered away. Just once. Just long enough. Then he recovered. Emily, he said softly, almost sadly. Sometimes people see patterns because they want answers. It was a reasonable sentence. It sounded compassionate. It also wasn't an answer. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. The board member left first. The attorney gathered his papers. Nathan pocketed his phone. Everyone acted as though control had been restored, as though the waitress had been handled. As Emily stood to leave, a folded valet ticket slipped halfway from Nathan's coat pocket, just enough for her to see the printed timestamp. 10:41 p.m., the exact minute the security footage disappeared. Emily did not mention the valet ticket until they were halfway across the city. Rain streaked the SUV windows in long silver lines, turning traffic lights into blurred pools of red and gold. Roman sat beside her in silence, one hand resting loosely on the leather armrest. He had asked no questions since they left Belmont. That bothered her more than if he had demanded answers. Most powerful men interrupted, corrected, filled every silence with themselves. Roman seemed willing to wait and see what silence revealed on its own. Emily reached into her coat pocket and unfolded the valet ticket. The paper was damp from her palm, creased at the corners. She handed it over. Roman read it once, then again. The timestamp sat there in black ink. 10:41 p.m. He turned the ticket over. Nothing. Just a claim number and the logo of a private garage 3 blocks from Belmont. You saw this in Nathan's pocket? Emily nodded. For less than a second. And you remembered the time. I remember times. Roman looked out the window. Yes, I noticed. They arrived at a narrow brick building near the waterfront. No sign outside. No receptionist. Just a steel door and an elevator that required a key. The room upstairs looked more like a private archive than an office. Shelves. Filing cabinets. Monitors. Quiet. Emily immediately noticed the old smell of paper. Notebooks. Contracts. Stored history. Roman laid the valet ticket on a desk beneath a lamp. A man in his 60s entered carrying a tablet. Gray hair. Sharp eyes. The kind of face that had spent decades learning what people looked like when they lied. You wanted vehicle records, he said. Roman handed him the ticket. The older man glanced at it. Garage cameras overwrite every 7 days. Try anyway. The man disappeared. 20 minutes passed. Emily sat at a long wooden table, turning her hospital bracelet around her wrist. The plastic edge had rubbed her skin raw. Across from her, Roman studied the maintenance receipt again. Neither spoke. Finally, Emily reached into the torn lining of her apron. There's something else. Roman looked up. She pulled out her old phone. The screen was cracked across one corner. Battery at 4%. She had protected that phone through surgery, discharge, lawyers, flowers, paperwork, and threats. Not because it was valuable, because something about that night felt unfinished. She unlocked it and opened a forgotten video folder. I thought it was nothing. The clip lasted 14 seconds. Grainy. Shaky. Filmed accidentally while she carried dishes through the service corridor. No faces. No confrontation. Just movement. Voices. At first it sounded useless. Then a man's voice cut through the static. Calm. Professional. Familiar. Delete her report. Silence followed. Then another voice. Nervous. What if someone already saw it? The video ended. The room seemed to shrink. Roman did not replay it immediately. He sat perfectly still, looking at the black screen after the clip ended. Emily noticed something change. Not emotion. Recognition. The dangerous kind. You know that voice, she said quietly. Roman didn't answer right away. Outside, a ship horn echoed across the harbor. Deep. Lonely. Finally he spoke. I've heard it for 8 years. Before Emily could ask more, the older man returned carrying a printed report. He placed it on the desk. Found something. Roman stood. The report showed a vehicle entering the garage at 10:37 p.m. and leaving at 11:26. Registered owner, Nathan Cole. So he lied, Emily said. Not yet, Roman replied. This only proves he was nearby. It sounded reasonable, controlled, but he was still staring at the paused video on her phone. Nathan's explanation remained possible. The timeline remained incomplete. Everything could still be coincidence. Then the older man placed a second document on the desk. There's one more thing. Roman picked it up. Read the page. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Emily caught it anyway. The report wasn't tied to Nathan. It was tied to someone else. Someone whose authorization code appeared inside the security system exactly 93 seconds before the footage disappeared. Someone Roman had trusted for nearly a decade. Roman kept looking at the report long after anyone else would have spoken. The harbor lights beyond the windows shimmered across the glass walls of the archive office. Somewhere below, a foghorn rolled across the water and disappeared into the night. The older man waited. Emily waited. Roman simply stood there with the page in his hand. Finally, he set it down beside the valet records and the damaged phone. Who authorized the access code? He asked. The older man answered immediately. Elliot Graves. The room became quieter. Not because anyone reacted, because nobody did. Emily watched the name land. She didn't know Elliot Graves personally, but she knew the type. Executive Vice President. 20 years with the company. The man whose photograph appeared in annual reports and charity brochures. The man employees described with words like respected, dependable, family. Roman lowered himself into a chair. Give me every security authorization Elliot approved during the last 3 years. 3 years. Every one. The older man nodded and left without another question. Emily looked at Roman. You think he's involved? Roman folded his hands. I think someone erased 93 seconds. His tone remained flat. I think someone altered a shift log. I think someone lied about being in the building. He looked toward the harbor. Thinking is not knowing. Hours passed. The investigation did not explode outward. It narrowed. Quietly. Like a blade being sharpened. Files appeared. Maintenance records. Insurance settlements. Internal reports. Emily sat at a long table reading page after page with her left hand. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights never changed. Around midnight, someone brought coffee. Neither of them touched it. Then Emily found something. At first it looked ordinary. Just another injury report. A dishwasher. Crushed hand. Workers' compensation claim. Settled. Closed. She almost moved on. Then she noticed the handwriting. The employee statement had been signed in blue ink. The witness verification beneath it was signed in black. Same date. Same time. Different pens. Different pressure marks. Different handwriting rhythms. She pulled the file closer. This isn't right. Roman walked over. Emily pointed at the signatures. The employee signed first. Roman nodded. The witness signed afterward. Emily shook her head. No. She slid the page toward him. The witness line pressed through the paper underneath. Whoever signed this was here first. Roman looked at the document for several seconds. Then reached for another report. Then another. The same pattern appeared again. And again. And again. Different employees. Different injuries. Same reverse sequence. Same witness signature. Elliot Graves. The room grew colder. Not physically. Morally. Emily stared at the stack. How many? Roman didn't answer. He was already opening another file. 30 minutes later, there were 12 reports spread across the table. 12 injured workers. 12 settlements. 12 signatures. 12 altered records. Emily leaned back and rubbed her eyes. Her cast felt heavier than usual. Do people ever get their names back? She asked quietly. Roman looked up. What? She stared at the reports. The people in these files. Her voice remained calm. Every page calls them claimants. Cases. Incidents. She swallowed. My father died in a warehouse accident when I was 13. The company report said equipment failure wasn't proven. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. My mother spent years trying to convince people he existed outside a file number. Silence followed. Long, heavy. Roman didn't offer sympathy. Didn't offer money. Didn't tell her everything would be okay. Instead, he asked, what's his name? Emily blinked. Daniel Walker. Roman nodded once. Nothing more. Yet somehow it mattered. A phone vibrated across the table. The older man had returned. He handed Roman a new folder. You should see this. Roman opened it. Inside were archived maintenance requests connected to the same injury reports. Every one of them had been marked resolved before repairs were actually completed. Authorized by Elliot Graves. Roman read the pages one after another. Then he stopped on the oldest request in the stack. His expression didn't change. That was what made it dangerous. Emily leaned forward slightly. The date printed at the top was nearly 9 years old. Roman looked at the approval signature beneath it, then closed the folder very carefully. For the first time since this began, he wasn't looking at Nathan Cole. He was looking at a mistake he had personally signed off on 9 years ago because he had trusted Elliot Graves without question. Roman remained seated for a long time after the others left. The old maintenance file rested on the desk in front of him. Rain traced slow paths down the harbor windows. The city beyond looked distant and blurred, like something viewed through water. Emily sat across from him with a mug of untouched coffee cooling between her hands. Neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was working. Roman finally closed the folder. We're not moving yet. Emily looked up. You think he'll run? No. Roman's voice was calm. I think he'll stay exactly where he is. The next morning, Belmont River House opened as usual. Linen tablecloths, crystal glasses, polished silver. Welf had a remarkable talent for pretending nothing was wrong. By noon, a private executive meeting had been scheduled in the top-floor dining suite. Elliot Graves attended. Nathan Cole attended. 3 board members attended. Nobody knew Roman had ordered additional cameras activated throughout the room. Nobody knew every microphone feed was being archived. Nobody knew Emily was upstairs, hidden behind a mirrored observation panel that overlooked the private dining suite. Her cast rested against her chest. A yellow legal pad sat on her lap. Roman entered 5 minutes late. Not enough to appear deliberate, just enough to make everyone wait. He took his seat. A bottle of Bordeaux stood unopened in the center of the table. Nobody touched it. Elliot smiled first. Everything all right? Roman nodded. Just reviewing old maintenance records. Elliot's expression didn't change. That alone caught Emily's attention. Most people blinked when they were surprised. Shifted. Hesitated. Elliot merely reached for his water glass. Smooth. Controlled. Old records? He asked. Roman opened a folder. You remember the warehouse conveyor incident 9 years ago? Elliot answered immediately. Too immediately. Of course. Emily's pencil stopped moving. Roman noticed it too. She could tell from the slight pause before his next question. What month was that? For the first time, silence stretched. Elliot set down his glass. I'd have to check. Roman nodded. Interesting. He slid a document across the table. You seemed certain a moment ago. The board members exchanged brief glances. Tiny. Barely visible. Pressure began to creep into the room. Nathan shifted in his chair. Roman continued calmly. Memory is unreliable. Isn't that what we've been telling injured employees? Nobody answered. Emily watched through the glass. Her heartbeat slowed. She had heard that sentence before. Nathan had used almost the exact wording on her in the hospital. Roman wasn't arguing. He was repeating their own language back to them. The meeting moved on. Budgets. Insurance renewals. Vendor contracts. Ordinary topics. Then Roman asked for the employee access logs connected to recent maintenance reviews. Nathan immediately offered a printed copy. Too fast. Roman accepted it without comment. Emily leaned forward. Something tugged at her memory. She stared at the pages. Then at Nathan. Then at the pages again. A small detail surfaced. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just wrong. She grabbed her legal pad and quickly wrote a note. One of Roman's security men carried it into the meeting minutes later. Roman unfolded the paper without expression. Read it. Then looked at Nathan. One question. Nathan smiled. Of course. Roman held up the access log. Why is this printed in 24-hour time? Nathan blinked. What? Belmont's employee system uses 12-hour formatting. Roman's voice stayed even. Always has. The room became very still. Emily remembered because she spent years checking shift assignments before dinner service. Every schedule, every clock-in slip, every kitchen printout, 12-hour format. Always. Nathan glanced at the document. Just for a second. Long enough. Must be a software update. Roman nodded slowly. Interesting. Then he placed a second copy beside it. An authenticated archive version retrieved that morning. 12-hour format. The same date. The same records. Different print structure. Nathan's fingers tightened around his pen. Barely. Yet everyone saw it. The board members said nothing. The unopened bottle of wine remained between them like a witness. Roman closed the folders. Thank you, Nathan. Nothing more. No accusation. No confrontation. Just gratitude. Somehow it sounded worse. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Chairs moved. Papers gathered. Polite goodbyes exchanged. Nathan stood to leave with the others. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and immediately looked toward the observation mirror without realizing he had done it. For the first time since this began, Emily watched certainty leave his face. He didn't know exactly what Roman knew, but he suddenly understood something far more dangerous. The waitress he thought he had silenced was still inside the room. For the next 48 hours, nobody was arrested. Nobody was confronted. Belmont River House continued serving $600 dinners beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters carried silver trays. Investors shook hands. Wealth performed normalcy with remarkable discipline. Then Roman scheduled a mandatory executive review in the private dining suite overlooking the river. The same room where employees had been dismissed, reports had been signed, and inconvenient people had been reduced to paperwork. By 6 o'clock, every board member was seated. Elliot Graves sat near the center of the table. Nathan Cole sat 2 chairs away. Attorneys lined one wall. Outside, the river reflected the fading orange of sunset. Inside, no one touched the water glasses. Emily stood near the far end of the room. Not hidden, not introduced. Her cast remained visible. Her old Navy apron rested folded in her hands. More than once, she caught someone looking at it, and then quickly looking away. Roman entered last. He carried a thin black folder. Nothing else. No speech. No warning. He took his seat and opened the folder. Silence settled over the room. Heavy. Intentional. Let's review an old incident, Roman said. His voice was calm enough to make several people uneasy. A screen lowered from the ceiling. The first document appeared. A maintenance request from 9 years earlier. Then another. Then another. 12 injury reports. 12 altered witness statements. 12 repair logs marked completed before repairs were ever performed. Elliot remained composed. Nathan looked at the screen without expression. One attorney cleared his throat. Roman, surely this can be handled internally. Roman raised one hand. The attorney stopped speaking. The room fell silent again. Then Emily stepped forward. She placed the torn apron on the table. Carefully, almost gently. This is why they broke my arm, she said. No anger. No tears. Just truth. She reached into the damaged inner lining and removed the maintenance receipt. Then the key card sleeve. Then her cracked phone. Each object looked small by itself. Together, they changed the atmosphere of the room. Roman nodded once. A technician connected the phone back up to the display system. The 14-second recording played through hidden speakers. Static. Footsteps. Then the voice. Clearer this time after forensic enhancement. Delete her report. The room froze. Nathan lowered his eyes. Nobody moved. The second voice followed. Nervous. Afraid. What if someone already saw it? The recording ended. Silence expanded across the room like pressure underwater. One board member removed his glasses. Another stared at the table. Elliot finally spoke. An isolated conversation proves nothing. Roman looked at him for a long moment. Then another file appeared on the screen. Security authorization records. Access logs. Internal approvals. Elliot's authorization code attached to every altered report. Every premature closure. Every falsified maintenance clearance. Every settlement. Emily watched color slowly leave Nathan's face. But Roman wasn't looking at Nathan anymore. He was staring at Elliot, the man he had trusted for nearly a decade. The man whose recommendations carried his signature. The man who had stood beside him at fundraisers, funerals, expansions, and board meetings. Then came the final document. A scanned approval from 9 years ago. Roman's own signature at the bottom. Elliot's recommendation directly above it. The room became impossibly quiet. Roman read the page once. Then again. His jaw tightened. For the first time, Emily saw genuine pain cross his face. Not anger. Not humiliation. Recognition. He had not created the lie, but he had given it shelter. Beneath his name. Beneath his company. Beneath his protection. Elliot opened his mouth to speak. Roman closed the folder. The sound echoed through the room. Small. Final. He removed his glasses and set them beside the torn apron. Then he looked toward the attorneys. Call my attorney. Now. The attorney was already making calls before the room fully emptied. No one raised their voice. No one slammed a door. The damage had moved beyond arguments. Facts had a way of draining the drama from a room. By midnight, Elliot Graves had been suspended from every position he held. By morning, federal investigators had received copies of the altered reports, security records, maintenance files, and settlement agreements. Nathan Cole resigned before anyone asked him to. It didn't help. His name remained in the investigation. Neither man left Belmont River House through the front entrance. Neither man ever sat at that executive table again. The weeks that followed were slower than Emily expected. Justice, it turned out, moved like winter. Quietly, relentlessly, one file at a time, one testimony at a time, one signature corrected at a time. The company reopened every injury claim connected to the falsified reports. Families who had spent years being told accidents were their fault received letters, legal support, and compensation reviews. Names that had been reduced to case numbers appeared again in official records. Real names. Real people. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Emily sat beside her mother in a small legal office overlooking the river. Her cast had finally come off. The skin beneath it looked pale and fragile. On the desk sat a corrected report. Daniel Walker. Cause of incident. Equipment failure due to unresolved maintenance defect. Emily read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Her mother pressed trembling fingers against her mouth. For 13 years, she had carried a version of the story that blamed the dead man instead of the system that failed him. Neither woman cried immediately. They simply stared. Some wounds healed too slowly for dramatic moments. Later, when they finally stepped outside, her mother squeezed her hand and whispered, "They said your father made a mistake." Emily looked at the corrected report tucked beneath her arm. Not anymore. Belmont changed too. Not all at once, but genuinely. An independent employee protection office was established. Injury reviews could no longer be approved by a single executive. Anonymous reporting systems were installed. Legal representation became available to workers without charge. Roman personally signed every reform order. More importantly, he stayed involved after the headlines disappeared. One evening, nearly 4 months later, Emily returned to Belmont River House for the first time since the investigation ended. The dining room looked exactly the same. Crystal glasses, white linens, river lights beyond the windows. Yet something fundamental had shifted. Staff members no longer lowered their voices when she entered. They greeted her by name. Not because they feared her, because they knew it. The executive dining suite remained upstairs, but Emily didn't go there. Instead, Roman led her toward a newly renovated office near the employee entrance. Smaller, simpler, warmer. On one wall hung photographs of kitchen staff, dishwashers, servers, bartenders, and maintenance workers. People who had previously existed only in the background. At the center of the display hung a frame. Emily stopped walking. Inside, the frame rested the old navy apron. The torn pocket had been preserved exactly as it was. The faint stain remained visible beneath the stitching. For a moment she couldn't speak. Months ago that apron had carried blood, fear, and evidence. People had looked at it and seen something disposable. Now it occupied the most visible place in the room. Roman stood quietly beside her. "I was going to replace it," he said. Emily shook her head. "No." Her voice softened. "Leave it." Silence settled between them. Comfortable this time. Through a nearby doorway came the distant sound of dishes being stacked after dinner service. Ordinary. Alive. The kind of sound she once thought nobody noticed. Roman looked at the framed apron. "You saved more people than you know." Emily smiled faintly and glanced toward the employees arriving for the evening shift. Men and women carrying trays, clipboards, towels, coffee cups. People the world rarely stopped to see. Then she looked back at Roman. "I didn't save them." She paused. "I just refused to look away." Roman said nothing after that. He didn't need to. Outside, the restaurant lights reflected across the river, and for the first time in a very long time, the people who had been invisible were finally being seen.